Let's see where we're at. Yeah, okay, so it looks like we opened up Fennec and Afara, and I think our third leader is Gar. Um, Regardless of who is to your right, those are the people you need to be worrying about because they're the after they choose their leaders, they'll be passing to you. Gar is just so much stronger than Fennec and Afara. Afara, I think, is the worst leader in the format. I think she actively kills you, and then Fennec is the worst of the playable leaders. So it's just not even close. I don't think Gar is particularly strong, to be completely honest. I think he's just fine, but still, he's actually playable. So he beats the other two leaders. Well, I guess Fennec is technically playable, but still, I am not particularly a fan. I think at this point, I'm trying to just explain to the dude tomorrow because he seemed pretty new to drafting, sort of what was going on and helping him out. He passes two Hans to Wes. Now Wes, I believe, has Jabba and Han. And as I've stated in my previous videos, when we have the ability to draft rare leaders, we pretty much go for that. So I assume Wes is going to be Jabba. We get past the Boba Fett, which is really good. Now we have two playable leaders, one in two different colors. I'm happy to take Boba Fett if that deck is open. I'm happy to play it. Hondo is just a step above Fennec, in my opinion. I also just don't want to play Hondo. It would take a pretty strong first pick for me to go into green villainous, and even then I'd try to go green blues. Like even if I open Maul, I still would try to beat Gar Saxon. Okay, so let's take a look what we got in the first pack. Nothing too exciting so far, except we do have a Hutt's Henchman, which is just very strong with Gar Saxon. Excuse me, strong with Gar Saxon, which is something that I'm thinking about. And then Tartful, which is, I think the card is fine to bad. Like, honestly, one of the things I actually like about this game is that the rares don't just set you in a direction because of their strength, right? Extremely color dependent and they're just not as strong as rares and mythics and magic. So like pack one picking a Hutt's henchman doesn't feel bad to me. You know, I'm not like, oh, I have to play Tarful. He's so strong, even though he's actually not all that strong, independent of anything I just said. Like he's just a pretty mediocre card. There's something to be said about Covert Strength. It's just a card I like to have, but typically they're free. You know, they're just a common and they go pretty late. So right now, I think I'm going to go Hutt's Henchman. For one, it puts me in the villainous deck, which I prefer to be with Gar Saxon right now over just taking a heroic card, just because the person to my right has heroic. And then also because it's just generic, it has no color, it can always go into one of the decks. So the same thing here. This is a pretty weak pack, but we get another Hutt's Henchman. This is good because Hutt's Henchman is particularly strong in the Gar Saxon deck, and especially in this format, but in this game in general, you need to be drafting to your leaders. You can't just take generically good stuff. Like taking generically good cards, I think just leads you to 2-1 more than it leads you to be actually able to win. So I'm going to take the card that's a 4-4 with the shield just because of Gar Saxon. Now we end up on a pretty interesting pick. So what I'm thinking here is like how heavily do I want to lean into the Gar Saxon deck? Like there are just safer picks, right? Like Covetous Rival is doesn't make a ton of sense to move into, but something to consider. Like I could just take Timely Reinforcement and or the Bounty Hunter, the 3/4, and those are like completely serviceable cards. Or I could just try and lean into this like Gar Saxon upgrades matters decks. And I think a lot of the strength from the leaders is their ability to make like very specific cards good. So like I think Arm to Teeth is just fine. You think it's pretty good in the more aggressive decks, but I want to test it out in Gar Saxon. So we're gonna try it here over like the just generically good Timely Reinforcement, which I think is probably a more correct pick if you don't have leaders, but you do have leaders in this game and you cannot ignore that. But you know, it's also kind of crazy to take a red card when our leaders are blue, red, or are blue, green, green. So I'm kind of telling myself, okay, I'm gonna be blue green villainy with these three picks, which is kind of committing. Over here, we have sort of a spot where I'm just confused. I had assumed that Wes was Jabba, and if he's Jabba, he's going to want to be playing Jabba Yellow so that he could play the 4/3 that enters with a shield if an opponent controls a creature with a bounty, which automatically turns on from Jabba's ability, which leads me to think he would take McClunky. So now I'm in a spot where I'm like, okay, neither of these players are yellow. McClunky's just too strong of a card. Obviously it's possible that there were just two stronger yellow cards, but that seems unlikely. And the person to my left I know is yellow, but at the end of the day, they're only passing to me once. So I end up taking the McClunky here, like a speculative McClunky. It's a little bit easier of a pick because the rest of the cards are so weak, but I it is a little bit of an odd pick. Okay, here's where we end up with some cards that are in colors that we're going to potentially be in, some villainous stuff, but I think this is just an easy three resource 3/2. It keeps us in just generically villainous. And also, as while this Gar Saxon build that I'm trying to draft right now is going to be on the more aggressive side, it's not like all in aggro like the way the Han Green deck is. So like I kind of waffle between legal authority and the 3/2, but I just don't want to commit to another color. And while I'm very high on the 1/4 grit and specifically Kira, I don't think that card actually finds its way into really other decks. So, it's blue black, which is my colors, at least in my mind, my colors, but even still, it's not what I'm looking for. So we see another one, and I pull it to the front because it's my colors, but at the end of the day, I'm still trying not to play this. So what I'm probably going with here is a covert strength. I think this card is not very strong. You're just happy to have them, and you're happy to be able to smuggle it out. It gives you easy smuggle decisions, and it can turn the tide later in the game when you need a creature to survive, and hopefully turn some of your creatures, some of your creatures the ability to 2-for-1. It's also particularly strong with Gar Saxon because all the tokens, the experience tokens and the shield tokens, are considered upgrades. So it's heal 2, give a creature +2/+1. So I think this is it, but it's a little concerning because it doesn't look like blue black is super open. I don't consider the 1/4 much of a signal, considering how bad it is. So like I am getting a little worried right now. But it's not the end of the world because I've taken mostly just straight villainous cards. So I still think we are getting ourselves out to pivot since we are in a little bit of a weirder spot. There's also some good news, whereas that if West is not Jabba, that means we're going to be seeing some more villainous cards. And if the person to our right is villainous, they're going to be likely taking green villainous because their leaders are Fennec, Hunter, and Hondo, which means Hondo is their only villainous leader. And we're not leaning towards green. We've taken only blue and red cards, which sets us up nicely for blue-red. So we're staying open with outs to have the quote-unquote correct cards be passed towards us based on early picks. But at the end of the day, I'm still completely fine with pivoting. Probably going to stay blue, but even though I have 3 different colors, it's not the end of the world. Last thing I'm going to talk about is McClunky is actually splashable. Okay, here we go. This is a clear signal to our archetype that it's open, and a clear signal that the other one that we didn't draft is open. So like I'm just slamming Super Commando Squad. It's just so strong in Gar Saxon. It's exactly what it might be the best blue black. I believe it's an uncommon in the format, but either way, seeing the Delphi X-Wing or whatever the fuck it's called is concerning just because that card is incredibly strong. It's also extremely strong in the green-red Han deck, which is also confusing now because if Wes is not Jabba, he's probably Han. And if he's Han, I don't understand why he wouldn't take that. But then again, Wes doesn't know what he's doing, so that could be the reason. Okay, so this one's pretty easy. This card's actually just fine. I don't think this card's actually particularly strong, but with this particular build where we're leaning heavily into Gar Saxon, I think it's going to just be stronger ever. It's going to be pulling its weight. And the reason why I'm talking about like leaning into your leaders more is in the first set, the blue-black equivalent Fennec like that commander, that leader just didn't care about what the rest of the deck was doing. Like if you had grit, that's great, but your creatures are just naturally taking damage. In this set, the leaders are much more specific, a lot less generic. Like Tarkin in the first set was he just cared as long as you had villainous creatures or villainous units. So just build a villainous deck. Krennic cares about damage being taken, so just deal damage. Boba cares about creatures taking damage or killing, removing creatures, so remove creatures. So, all right, now we have the solidified. We know Wes is not in Java, so we see this relentless pursuit. We take the Super Commando, and we know that it's very unlikely that either of our players to our right are in yellow. It's basically just impossible unless Wes's brain has melted and he just has no idea what he's doing. Here we come across our third Hut's Henchman versus a second Covert Strength. It's easy. Hut's Henchman is just a great common to begin with. It's probably one of the better 4-drops in Villainous, and it's just particularly good at Gar Saxon. 4 resource 4/4 with shield that becomes a 3/4 after it loses its shield is just really strong. That's 2-for-1ing a fair bit of the time, so we're extremely happy to pick that up. Now we get our Covert Strength. Not a ton to say about the rest of these cards. I'm going to lean more towards blue cards and red cards, although I think the red Bounty Hunter attack with 3 creatures could be fine if you end up in the right deck, but I'm not taking on a Covert Strength. Now we sort of have the very top end starting to come together, and the very bottom end of Smuggle and cards that we want to attach to our units starting to come together. But it's a little concerning because we don't have 2 and 3 drops. So we're going to have to really focus on that in pack 2. We take some bounties. I think these bounties are fine, especially if we're, in our minds leaning more towards red. So if we are going to be blue-red, which I'm not sure we're going to be, right, at this point, but it's something to consider. That's where in my mind, that's where I'm leaning towards. The bounties can be good because the red has a fair bit of the bounties matters cards, like I believe it's called Covetous Rivals. It's a 6-mana 5/5 or it's grit that has when it enters the battlefield, deal 2 to a creature with a bounty, things like that. Okay, now we see a 3-drop, which is great. And again, like I was talking about early, I'm happy to take commons and uncommons early in this format. I see a 4-Lom, and then I see Mandalorian Armor. Here I double check just to make sure, since there's so much text on these cards, is Gar Saxon a Mandalorian? I believe he is. I believe all the 4/7s are thematically Mandalorians, but not all Mandalorians in type that means. So anyways, I'm going up. This is a very strong upgrade if you have a Mandalorian that you can consistently play. And now we have 2. We have one that plays it out for free, and then we have Gar Saxon, which it gives Gar Saxon +2/+3 and a shield. That's just fantastic. Gar Saxon is just going to start eating the board when he does that, or he'll be able to race, which ideally, I think, if we're going blue-red. And again, it's still in the back of my mind, even though we haven't taken a ton of red cards, I'm thinking I'm blue-red. Also looking to the left, I'm seeing Cad Bane, Fennec, and Gar. It's any color can pair with any color, but I don't think Kevin to the left of me is drafting blue-red Gar, and he's probably Cad Bane or Fennec. And while Cad Bane is fine with red, I think at least I typically had more success with Cad Green, but that's all dependent. Maybe he took the Delphi X-Wing as a sign and then went Fennec because Green Heroic was just so open. Okay, so now we have 2 very strong cards. The Hut's Henchman, which we already have 3 of, and Crest, I can't pronounce this, the bad Wookiee, the fucking evil Wookiee. He's the not good guy Wookiee. The bad Wookiee, bad as an evil, is just such a strong card. The only thing I'm considering here is just like the top end of my curve is so filled out, but it's just so much stronger than anything else. This card is so damn good. Even if it's like, it was particularly strong in Kira, which is the last deck I drafted, but even without having a way to enable it, it's still a strong card. I picked up some of the 0-mana bounties, or the 0 resource bounties, which now just gives me free ways to turn him to ready him. This pack is pretty easy. It's Rivals Fall. There's just nothing else. The armor is a cool card if we were heroic, but there's really nothing in here for us. You always want to have 1 to 2 rivals falls in your deck. If you had 3, that's fine. Just be comfortable with resourcing one pretty early. This isn't Magic. You're not going to lose the game if you pitch your removal. You will be fine. As long as you play appropriately and plan appropriately and trade accordingly. Okay, so now in my mind, we're firmly blue-red villainous, right? Like Kraston is the bad Wookiees, enough of a sign. He's stronger than most of the cards. I think given some busted rare or something like Fennec Shand, which puts us in like a very weird spot. Now I'm just confused. I I just had assumed that Kevin was surely yellow, but seeing this, I don't think he is. But we're only getting passed from him once, so I guess I just have to pass the Fennec. I just can't pass Pike Sentinel. I just have to take this card also. My deck is starving for 2 and 3 drops. This is the first 2 drop we take, so I take the Pike Sentinel. Okay, he's just not. We actually had discussed it, and we're not as high on Slaver's Bounty as we used to be, but I still don't think that he's uh what's this called? Cad Bane. We do see some strong heroic cards here, but the client is just broken. The client lets us in a deck like this, it helps us be able to race since our creatures are going to be so strong that we could just activate him to gain some life and then have very positive trades against our opponent's creatures since we have so many hot henchmen and things with shields and so much stuff with upgrades. So he's extremely strong. Not to mention he's a 3 resource 3/5 because of Gar Saxon, and also he turns on the evil Wookiee. The evil Wookiee cares about opponents' units having bounties, and the client is a bounty giver. Or I don't know, like the what you call it in SWU when a creature gives bounties, but he gives your opponent's leaders bounties. Another Cloud Rider. Like, okay, here we see Clan Saxon Gauntlet. This card is a premium. We snap it off. There's not a ton to think about. And this is sort of what happens in SWU. Because there's heroic and villainous versions of all the colors, you end up with 8 colors. So after the draft sort of figures itself out and people, like lock into colors, you just start getting your decks really filled out in packs 2 and 3. Like honestly, a lot of the decks start looking very similar to each other after drafting because you're always consistently getting those colors. As long as you're not going after a color combination from someone to your right or two to your right that they're after, your deck's pretty much going to look similar other than rares. Here I take a 3 resource 3/3 Mandalorian because Gar Saxon is our leader. Also because we just need 3 drops, and I'm expecting the 3 resource. The 3 resource 3/3 with Grit and Overwhelm. I do believe that red villainous is open, and we'll be seeing a lot of it when we start getting passed from the left. Here, the Highland Enforcer is just not playable in my mind. I don't want to be playing Rickety Space Fucker or whatever it's called. I think that card's just bad, even though it might give you a resource. It's still unlikely that it does, and it's just not strong enough. So the reason I'm taking so long is I just don't want 4 resource 3/6 with grit and bounty to take 5 to the base. If it healed 5 to my opponent's base, that would be fine. But I don't think this card's doing enough work. I've actually never played it, but in my mind, I don't think it's doing enough work there. Is it actually eating 2 things and saving 5 life? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but I drafted it anyways, but I don't think it won't make the final cut of this deck. But right now all I'm thinking about is 2 and 3 drops. Okay. So here's the most interesting pick. We have Clan Saxon Gauntlet and a second Pike Sentinel, which I'm extremely greedy, but even I'm not this greedy that I'm going to take another 6 drop over the Pike Sentinel. I think Pike Sentinel is like some crazy broken card. I think it's just what this deck wants to be doing. And I also just need two drops, so I take it. The reason why I say it wants to be doing this is I think this deck in general wants to slow the game down enough that I can upgrade a couple of my 4, 5, and 6 drops and then run away with the game. Here we take another Arm to the Teeth. I'm actually happy to be playing this. Typically, I just want one in my aggressive decks, but because it aligns so well with with Gar Saxon, and because I have a bunch of Hut's henchmen and super commando units, they all have shields. Like you don't feel as bad for playing a two resource upgrade that doesn't give any defense. Okay, here we go. My predictions are correct. The Deathwatch loyalists are going to start coming around because I do believe Red Villainous is open. So now I have this, and it's another unit to trigger with my Mandalorian loyalist. Also hits the Super Commandos, so we're in good shape. I'm not playing any of these cards. Deathmark is good. I think it's just fine, but we're not a bounties matters deck. Like the client is more than enough to turn on the bounties for the evil Wookiee, and the evil Wookiee just gets turned on by opponents' bounties that are just attached to the cards naturally. So no big deal there. Now we're just waiting for the player to our right to make a pick because we always zone draft, and I don't think we're gonna get much. Actually, we do. We get a unlicensed whatever this is called. This card is fine. A 2 resource 3/2 that heals your opponent. Probably not the best card for an aggressive deck because it's gonna heal it for 5, but because it has Saboteur and can get rid of shields and go over Sentinel and hit other opponents' space units, I think the card is just strong. And again, while I am trying to be aggressive, the type of aggro I'm talking about is not just the type of just blind aggression from the beginning, like you're going to see like in a Han Green deck. My deck wants to quote unquote turn the corner, right? It wants to play a bunch of Sentinel units, then develop some creatures that are strong because of Gar Saxon, like the Hut's Henchmen, and then start upgrading them with cards that help attack, right? Because they have shield and they're going to live through multiple attacks against my or from my opponent's creatures. Whereas normally you'd be worried about playing Arm to the Teeth on something without a shield. Okay, now we see a house. Let's Pike Sentinel, easy, desperate. That card is so strong. The Freighter. I hate passing it, but what are you gonna do? Okay, so now looking at this pack, there's just a lot going on. There's a big gap between cards that I need and cards that I want to play. Like I'm happy for it to play another evil Wookiee, but we just simply just need two drops. I think the evil traditions or whatever it's called, the bad Mandalorian traditions will wheel, and I just can't afford to take another 5 drops. So here we take Pike Sentinel. I'm a little sad because it's definitely not the strongest card, but it's probably the most necessary to make my deck functional. All right, looking here, we see another Mandalorian Warrior, which is fine because it's a 3 drop. We see Vambrace Grapple Shots and this the 2 resource Villainous 3/3 with Deal 2 and Overwhelm. And I think I'm just gonna take this card simply because I'm personally high on it. It trades up a fair bit of time and trades with a 3 drop because it has 3 power. It can turn on grit on certain creatures, which I think I'm gonna have more of, other than the Wookiee and the other card. And even if it doesn't, you just have a 2 resource 3/1 because your 2 resource units are just gonna trade anyways. So the fact that it has one toughness is only a issue against Cad Bane. So I'm gonna take this. I think it's just stronger than a 3 resource 3/3. I'd rather just take a 2 resource 3/1. That's just my general thought process there. Taking a look at my deck, it's starting to flesh out a little bit more. We're pretty starved in the 3 drop department, but our 2 drops have come together and we're pretty happy there. Now I think we're in a place where we can start going back to what we were doing in pack one, where we just take the strongest cards. Because I think most of the deck has come together at this point. But let's see what we get past here. Yeah, I don't even know how we're getting an Adelphi X-Wing or whatever. I just can't believe that card is so strong. And a McClunky. I'm just so confused as to what's going on. But here we just take a Black Sun Starship Trooper or whatever it's called. 3 resource, 3/2 Sentinel is perfect for what we need to be doing is slowing down the game. It's got a lot of fight against Y-Wings. It's clogging up space, and I don't think we're going to try and contest space. I'm happy to take units with Sentinel in space. So I can just upgrade my units on the ground. Speaking to Wes, he typically likes to play arm to the teeth on space units because they're less likely to trade. And I would actually mostly agree with that, except in the instance that you are this type of Gar Saxon deck, because you have so many upgraded units on the ground that have shield. Because I have all these Hutch henchmen and the Super Commando units, so it's not the end of the world as long as the two units are getting in for an attack or two. We're gonna just be completely fine with that. If they trade afterwards. It's not the end of the world because at the end of the day, you are going to be 2-for-1ing yourself, which I don't think is as big of a deal in this game. Here we see a Dengar, and then Fell the Dragon, and then another Relentless Pursuit, which is just crazy. But we're definitely not taking the third Starfighter. This is an easily Fell the Dragon. The biggest problem for this deck is probably going to be the 5 resource, 5/6 in space that's in red and heroic, and this is just a clean answer to it. The rest of the ground creatures aren't going to be too much of an issue. I think our creatures, other than like playing against like maybe like a Rancor, are just going to outclass most of our opponent's units, so I'm not too worried about that. Here, I think it's just another Death Watch Loyalist. We briefly look at Ritual Wards, but I don't think we're a bounty deck. Also, I just like Death Watch Loyalist as a card. I think it's fine. I used to be a lot higher on it, but it doesn't seem as strong as I thought it was. There's just like it's a fine card to upgrade, especially I think with in Gar Saxon where your upgrades are giving an additional power. I think the Overwhelm is going to be super strong because of Gar Saxon's ability. The only issue I have with it is because it's 3 toughness. It's typically not living through an attack, so it's just like there to trade. But even still, I'm just happy to take 3 drops. So there's no complaints there. Here we take another Mandalorian Warrior. I think having a mix of 2 and 2 or 3 and 2, can't remember what I end up with. It's just going to be pretty strong with this deck because we just have so many Mandalorians now. We have 2 of the Loyalists. We have 2 of the Commandos. We have Gar Saxon. We have the 6-drop 5/6. We just have Mandalorians. Even Clan Saxon Gauntlet is a Mandalorian. So happy to take another 3-drop. Happy to take another one of these. And again, as much as I want to play a Rickety whatever, because I have so many non-creature units or non-unit cards in my deck, I still don't think it's good enough. Even in a deck it's very strong with. Okay, here we see Embo. I think Embo is very strong. Also, one of the things to note is that if you can upgrade the Embo with something that gives him more toughness, he just becomes even stronger because his ability to eat stuff is usually when he's attacking units that are 2 drops and sometimes 3 drops. But if you can upgrade him and he can get in for an attack and heal himself, it's just so strong. All right, sorry for the blur here. I think the only thing in our colors is Covetous Rivals. Don't think there's much else to take here. It's not really much of a choice. But I think this is one of the last cards we're going to get. And now looking at our deck, we're pretty happy with where we're at. Not too much here. I don't think any of these cards are of any consequence. I take a Rickety Quad Jumper just because hypothetically we could see play with it, but I don't think we want to be playing it. I don't take the 1 resource 2/1 just because I don't think we're aggressive enough, and I think that deck just wants to be really aggressive cards. You don't want to take cards that have Smuggle just because they have Smuggle. Like resourcing bad cards still means that your decision was when you drew between resourcing a good card and a bad card, and putting bad cards in your deck doesn't make your good ones any better. So I don't think this card is bad. I just don't think it's for our deck. So bad for our deck. Here we see Brutal Traditions, and this is a gift. And like I was talking about, how decks sort of just naturally come together. The fact that this wheel sort of speaks to that a little bit, where like the the archetypes start to become like almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy, where the blue black Gar Saxon decks typically looks like all the other blue black Gar Saxon decks because all the cards are just so difficult to draft. Like, you just can't splash, right? Like, if you want to play this, it would cost you four, and I'd make it unplayable, right? So just like it's just going to wheel a lot more than in a game like Magic, where like a strong uncommon just wouldn't. So that's definitely making it into our deck. Here, I just take this because it's a hyperfoil. I'm not playing any of these cards. I don't think I'm playing anything from the rest of the picks, but I'm just gonna let the video roll just in case there's something that I looked over. The zero drop bounty, that card is fine, but it just simply is not for it's simply not for this kind of a deck. We're just not aggressive enough. Take the stolen land speeder because it's a rare. I don't think I'm ever playing a 3 resource 2/5 in space, although I do kind of regret it because we could have brought it in the board against a deck that's heavy space and upgraded it. So that's something I overthought, but I didn't think we were going to actually be that weak to space. Thought we'd be able to outrace it, but who knows? I'm just not very high on the 3 resource 2/5. And then last card is a Death Mark, and that is the draft.